All right, greetings. This is April 7th, and this is Lecture 2, and I really want to encourage you to go to your modules and pull up PowerPoint for today's lectures. This would be PowerPoint number 5. And you're going to want to follow along pretty closely because I'm going to be talking about some things that I think are going to really help us in our process, but you're going to want to be able to track with me on the PowerPoint. So I'm going to give you a moment to pull that up. We are going to have about 2 or 3 more lectures in this set. And hopefully this will give you enough as you begin to move forward into your exegetical work. Now again, you're going to be doing some research this weekend, I recognize that, and I want to make sure that you have the document that I think I've sent out before, but I want to make sure I send out again about the kind of sourcing that the library still offers and the kind of text that you're going to want to use and not use for exegesis. And so there are scholarly articles, and there's scholarly sources, and then there's more devotional sources, and we want to avoid the more devotional sources. Now remember, when you go to do your word study, just a real quick thing as you're pulling up your PowerPoint, what I really want to encourage you to do is to ensure that you're using something like Bible Hub's lexicon that's going to pull up all of the different words in the original language. Then you're going to be able to do some word study search in the Bible Hub app. And so you're going to want to earn the Bible Hub website. And so you're going to want to make sure you look at that as well. Okay? And there's that PowerPoint that has examples of that. I think it's the 3rd PowerPoint when we did the world behind the text. So you can look at that. It's all the way at the end of the PowerPoint. There should be some links, hyperlinks to that, and you'll be able to utilize that to kind of see how I did it in the past. So let's go ahead and look at this PowerPoint, and I want you to go all the way down to, I believe it's slide number 4, in which talks about the 3 worlds of the text. That's where we've been living over the course of the last several weeks. We've been talking about these 3 worlds of the text and trying to understand the history of interpretation. We've tried to understand what we mean by the world behind the text, the world of the text, the world in front of the text. We've tried to identify the different kinds of criticisms that have been involved in each one of those. But one of the things that we've talked about kind of consistently throughout this process is that each one of these worlds had a different time in which people believed that meaning was sort of anchored and rooted in that particular world. So there was a point at which we believed that history could carry the weight of interpretation. If I understood what something meant, I can understand what something means. By reconstruction of the historical background and the author and the author's intention or the intended audience, that if I can just simply reconstruct the history, then I will be good to identify meaning. But then there were some who began to call into question the objectivity and the accessibility that we have to pure, unadulterated history. And so the shift then is from the world behind the text to the world of the text, focusing on the text as an object in of itself, and that within the text itself there are certain forms of meaning in terms of the kind of genre, the kind of rhetorical devices used within the text, how the text fits within the overarching scheme of the other texts, the deep-rooted structures, that suggesting that text, once a text has been created, the text takes a life of its own, and the text carries within it its own evidence of meaning. So there was a shift from the world behind the text to the world of the text. But then there was a movement in the 20th century that suggested that meaning couldn't necessarily be located as a static object in the world behind or the world of, that meaning is always in flux or always changing, and that's because of the prominence of the reader within the text, that meaning is a construct, and it's constructed by the one who stands in front of the text reading the text. So really all textual interpretation is reader-oriented, which makes it often feel very relativistic or shaped by one's bias or assumptions. And so they look back over the text looking for something to pull it into the present and make it meaningful. And so there was a suggestion that all meaning then needed to be located in front of the text because that's where true meaning happens. Now, what I've been talking to you a lot about is that within the context of Wesleyan theology, we want to suggest that it's not located in any one of the worlds, but really an integrative approach in which we learn how to sort of walk the tightrope, right? We want to walk the tightrope between the 3 worlds, recognizing that each one of the worlds has within it elements of what could shape or help us to understand what this text means to us as we stand before the text today. So I do want to understand the historical context. I do want to understand the literary analysis of the text. And I do want to understand the implications of what stands in front of the text and how what stands in front of the text can influence and affect how I engage and make sense of the text itself, okay? So that, again, becomes extremely important for us to recognize and to keep in mind. So we're talking about walking this tightrope. So how do we walk this tightrope? Part of me in walking this tightrope is when we understand that we're moving from studying the Bible as an object to recognizing that what is really happening with the text of Scripture is an extended conversation. Okay? So the Bible isn't an object like an artifact to be studied and evaluated. The Bible is an ongoing conversation between writer, text, and recipient, between God's Spirit, writer, text, and recipient, between God's Spirit, recipient, writer, and text, that there is this dance. And that's the language that I really want to use for interpretation. There's an interpretive dance that is taking place within the context of Scripture. We are not objective bystanders who can look over the text with a God's eye view, detached and disconnected from our assumptions and biases, look at the text and determine the sole true meaning as though we have access to the intentionality of the author like no one else did. No, we are partnering with God's Spirit in the same way that the author themselves partnered with God's Spirit in the creation of the text.